Hello again, everyone. Welcome to Washington Gun Law TV. I'm Washington Gun Law President William Kirk. Thanks for joining us. Hey, we're going to talk about a scenario that's becoming increasingly common. It's becoming increasingly common due to the transitory nature of the United States of America, especially post-pandemic. We have had millions of people relocate to other states for various reasons, most of which are just seeking individual freedoms. Some of those individuals, however, owned NFA firearms and other items, and some of those individuals forgot to get ATF's permission before they moved to that new state. They are now waking up to the fact that, ooh, I might have screwed up and I don't know what to do. We've had a chance to do some research. It took us a long time. I'll explain what we've done here to get to these answers, but we do have answers for you. So today, let's spend a few minutes, let's slow it all down so you can understand, and let's talk about, I moved out of state and forgot to register my NFA items. What do I do now? Okay, so the scenario we're talking about today is not that uncommon, especially in today's day and age. A person resides in state A, let's call it Washington State, has accumulated lawfully a bunch of NFA items, has paid the tax stamps, everything is completely copacetic. The individual decides, you know, I want to go somewhere where I can actually live free like an American again, moves to Florida, okay? However, prior to moving to Florida, they did not fill out an ATF Form 5320.20, which a lot of people don't realize that if you own NFA items and you want to take an NFA item other than a suppressor across state lines, even temporarily, I'm just going over there for a couple days for a hunting trip or whatever, you are supposed to receive ATF approval before you actually transport the item via a Form 5320.20. The scenario I'm discussing today is I was speaking with a gentleman who now resides in Florida who had made the escape from the People's Republic of Washington. The purpose of the conversation was to talk about what some changes needed to be done in order to make his gun trust more valid in the state of Florida. However, during the course of the conversation, I said to this individual, hey, by the way, when you moved, you already got ATF approval on your 5320.20, to which he responded, my what? And that's when we realized that there was a problem. Since that time, I've had multiple other phone calls with individuals who have also said, oh my gosh, I think I messed up. I moved from state A to state B. I didn't realize I needed to do this. I've been established in this state for almost a year now. What do I do? Well, I originally tried to talk to a couple of ATF field agents who just gave me the runaround. And again, I'm not being critical of them. I don't know if they just knew the answer. I then made the dreaded attempt of trying to call the ATF NFA division myself, spent the better part of 2 days on hold and got nowhere. Happened to be talking to a friend of mine who is in law enforcement here in Washington State, who happens to be a part of a lot of task force. So he works in conjunction with the FBI and the ATF regularly. He and I were just having a casual conversation. I mentioned this dilemma and he said to me, hey, let me make a few phone calls. Because in law enforcement, there's a lot of back channel connections that say you can speak with the ATF or the FBI right away, based upon what it is you might be investigating. Within a couple of hours, I was able to actually receive an answer from the ATF according to my law enforcement friend. Now, here's what I want you all to understand first about NFA items, okay? For those of you who don't know what an NFA item is, don't worry, you're not in this problem. You're not in this dilemma at all. If you do know what an NFA item is, you will know that it is the apex predator of firearms. It is the one firearm that the federal government does allow to be registered and kept in a registry. And there's only one of two ways that normal citizens like you and me can accumulate these items. If we are going to build or manufacture an NFA item, we will fill out a Form 1 to ATF. Once it's approved and we pay our tax stamp, we can take lawful possession of that manufactured NFA item. If we are purchasing the item as is, then we will get an approved Form 4 from the ATF and pay our tax stamp. Now, this is important, and many of you who know NFA items, you will know this already. Once that tax stamp is approved, that NFA item needs to be engraved. And one of the pieces of information that needs to be engraved on that item is the location where that item is kept and or manufactured. So, for example, any NFA items that I had would have the abbreviation for Kirkland, Washington in it because that is where those firearms would be kept. Now, like I also said, once you have an approved NFA item, if you want to take that item across state lines for any purpose, temporarily or permanently, except for suppressors. Suppressors do not fall under this category, but all of the other things, short barrel rifles, short barrel shotguns, other destructive devices, automatic weapons. If you were going to take any of those across state lines, you are supposed to get prior approval from the ATF via the 5320.20. So, our scenario here, as you recall, is individual who is otherwise completely lawfully in possession of these items has now moved to another state, has been in that state for a period of time. He has moved from the People's Republic of Washington to the free state of Florida, but he's been in Florida now for over a year. What do we do when we realize that this problem has occurred? Well, as I mentioned, we were able to get it straight from the horse's mouth, that is the ATF. So now here's the deal. If you have fallen into this category, you're really going to fall into one of two subcategories, okay? For our hypothetical, our individual has moved from the state of Washington to the state of Florida, which means the firearms that he brought with him to the state of Florida, there is no law that prohibits the possession or importation of those firearms, which means he is still lawfully allowed to own those firearms and to possess them in the state of Florida. There actually is no penalty for failing to fill out a 5320.20 on time. However, there are criminal sanctions if you fail to update the NFRTR, the National Firearms Registry and Transfer Record, which is where all NFA items go, and it's how the ATF keeps track of them. So in order to fix this problem, what we have to do is fill out a 5320.20. So if we fall in a situation in which we have moved from state A to state B, and state B's local state laws allow you to continue to lawfully possess that item, my advice to you is to fill out a 5320.20 and submit it to the ATF, okay? But let's change the scenario here. Let's have this individual go from Florida to the People's Republic of Washington. Well, now let's assume that he's bringing some short barrel semi-automatic rifles with him, one of the more commonly owned NFA items. Okay, here's the problem, and this is one of the reasons that the ATF mandates that we do a 5320.20. Because see, that now, with the passage of our assault weapon ban here in Washington State, would be unlawful activity because this individual now would be importing banned firearms into the state of Washington, which means had he filled out the 5320.20 ahead of time, it would have been rejected by the ATF because the ATF would have said, you're not allowed to bring those firearms into the state of Washington. If you are in that situation where you were perfectly lawful owning these firearms in state A, but you now reside in state B, and those firearms are not allowed to be owned or possessed or kept in that state, well, then the last thing in the world you're going to want to do is actually fill out a 5320.20 because you will literally put your criminal conduct in writing to a federal agency, which will inevitably report to local law enforcement, and you will find yourself in trouble. So yeah, if you have moved into a state that does not allow the possession of these particular NFA items, and you have not filled out a 5320.20, you are in possession of a firearm that could be deemed unlawful under both state and federal law. So the scenario there is likely either to destroy that firearm or get it the hell out of that state and back to its original state. But again, that creates a whole nother wrinkle of problems. So if you fall into that latter category, this is really what I recommend you do. Contact local counsel. Contact local counsel right away, somebody who is well-versed in Second Amendment issues, ATF issues, and all of that, and have a discussion about how best to resolve this issue. Because the last thing you want to have happen is get busted in possession of this firearm and now be facing charges either on the state, federal, or on both levels for really what was an innocuous paperwork error. So, once again, just to recap our scenario, if you have moved from state A to state B, and state B allows you to possess those firearms, then my advice is to fill out a 5320.20 and submit it to the ATF. If, however, you move from state A to state B, and state B now places you behind the iron curtain where you no longer can possess those firearms, well, you have put yourself really between a rock and a hard place, and at this point, you probably need to contact local counsel immediately. Listen, we're going to go ahead and link up everything that we discussed down below so that you guys can geek out on it for yourself. And if any of you have ideas for videos, things that you want to see Washington gun law cover, well then click on that link right there, because I got to be honest with you, some of the best videos we ever did weren't actually our ideas. In the meantime, if you guys got any other questions about this or anything else related to what's left of your Second Amendment rights, you should know how to get a hold of Washington gun law by now. If you don't, that's okay. That information is down there in the description box. And then finally, let's everyone remember that part of being the lawful and responsible gun owner, like we talk about all the time here, is to know what the law is in every situation and how it applies to you in any instance that you may find yourself. Until next time, thanks for watching and stay safe.